When we talk about feeling God's peace, especially in the middle of chaos, we often overlook one of the most powerful truths in Scripture. God is not intimidated by our cries. He isn't distant. He isn't shocked by our emotions. In Psalm 142, David begins with something so honest, so raw, it stops you in your tracks. He says, "I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble." David wasn't whispering. He wasn't pretending to be strong. He was crying aloud. And there's something so deeply liberating in that. Just crying out to God with the truth of what you're carrying. You see, too often we approach God with edited prayers, polished words, holding back the parts of ourselves we think are too messy to bring to him. But David teaches us something different. He shows us that the first step to peace is honesty. You don't have to fix your feelings before you come to God. You don't need a solution before you speak to him. Peace isn't found in pretending. Peace begins in presence. David wasn't at peace when he started this psalm. He was overwhelmed. He was likely hiding in a cave, running for his life, uncertain of tomorrow. But what did he do? He didn't collapse into self-pity. He didn't run to people first. He ran to God. And he did it with everything he had in his soul. Some of you have been carrying silent battles. You've been trying to be strong for everyone else, holding it together while something inside of you is crumbling. And maybe you've been told that peace looks like smiling through the storm. But real peace, God's peace, starts with surrender. And sometimes surrender looks like a cry, a real one, a broken, breathless, "God, I need you." That cry is not weakness. That cry is strength in disguise. It's the moment your spirit finally gives up trying to control the outcome and leans into the one who already knows how the story ends. David says, "I pour out before him my complaint." That phrase, pour out, means he didn't hold anything back. He emptied the cup of his soul right there before God. That's what we're invited to do. When was the last time you let your prayer be unfiltered? When was the last time you said, "God, this hurts. God, I don't understand. God, I feel like I'm drowning"? That's not a lack of faith, no. That's where faith begins. Faith doesn't deny the storm. It chooses to believe that even in the storm, God listens. I've seen it time and again. Someone so tormented by inner pain, so weighed down by despair, finally breaks, and in that moment of honest, vulnerable surrender, something shifts. It may not be visible. The circumstances may still look the same, but something in the atmosphere of their soul changes. It's peace. Not the kind you get from a change in situation, but the kind that comes from knowing you are heard by the one who created the stars. There's a moment when you stop trying to hold yourself together and you let God hold you. That's the moment the peace begins to flood in. Not because you've figured it out, not because the pain has disappeared, but because you've opened your heart wide enough for his spirit to meet you there. David cried aloud. That wasn't performance. It wasn't formality. It was communion. It was the sound of someone reaching beyond the limits of human strength and into the divine presence of a loving Father. God responds to desperation clothed in faith. He doesn't need eloquence. He doesn't need your strength. He needs your heart. Just give him your heart, your trembling, questioning, exhausted heart. That's enough. And in just 5 minutes, in the time it takes to breathe, to whisper, to cry, you can go from burdened to held. You can move from fear to peace. Because peace isn't found in the absence of trouble. Peace is found in the presence of God. So right now, don't worry about what to say. Don't search for perfect words. Just cry. Just pour it out. Just lift your voice like David did. And let heaven hear the sound of your soul reaching for its creator. He's listening. That's where peace begins. There are moments in life when the weight of loneliness presses so heavily you can almost feel it in your chest. You look around and see no one standing with you, no one truly understanding what's going on deep inside. You smile in public, nod your head at all the right times, and yet, when you're alone, just you and your thoughts, It feels like the world has gone quiet. Psalm 142 brings us into one of those sacred moments in David's life. He says, "Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life." That is a cry that echoes through the hearts of so many people. No one sees me. No one understands. No one cares. It's a place of soul-wrenching isolation. But do you see what David does with that pain? He names it. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't try to cover it up with hollow declarations. He brings it into the light of God's presence. And if you've ever felt like that, like no one truly knows the burden you're carrying, you're not alone. Not really, because God knows. And more than that, He stays. When everyone else walks away, when your phone is silent, when the people you thought would be there disappear into the background, He remains. He's the God who doesn't leave when the tears come. He's the God who draws near when others retreat, and He doesn't just tolerate your presence, He treasures it. Sometimes peace doesn't come from the absence of loneliness. It comes from the awareness of God's nearness in it. It's not about being surrounded by people. It's about being held by the one who made you. And the beautiful thing is this: God is not a substitute for human connection. He's better. People may not call back. Friends may not show up, but when you quiet your heart and turn to Him, you will find a presence that fills every empty space. David wasn't exaggerating. He was being completely honest. And maybe that's what you need today. Not a performance, not forced strength, but honesty. Maybe you need to say, "God, I feel invisible." Maybe you need to sit in His presence with your pain and just breathe. Because even though you feel alone, you're not forsaken. God has not forgotten you. He sees the silent tears. He hears the prayers you can't even form into words. He knows the ache behind your smile. Sometimes we look for God in the loud miracles and the thunderous breakthroughs, but more often than not, He shows up in the stillness, in the quiet moments when we think no one is paying attention. That's where peace finds us, not always in the fixing, but in the awareness that He is near. There is something incredibly sacred about being seen by God when you feel invisible to everyone else. There is healing in that kind of encounter. There is comfort that no earthly relationship can match. It's a whisper to your heart that says, "I see you, I know you, and I care." David said, "No one is concerned for me," but look at what he does next. He turns that very thought into a confession of trust. He shifts from feeling abandoned to remembering who his true refuge is. That's the key. You can acknowledge the loneliness and still lean into the truth of God's presence. You may be alone in a room, but you are not alone in your reality. You are not talking to the ceiling. You are not praying into the void. Your words, your thoughts, your sighs, they rise like incense, and the Lord of heaven hears them all. That's why, even in the loneliest cave, David could find peace. Not because he had a solution, not because he felt better, but because he remembered. God was still with him. And that memory, the awareness of God's companionship, became his anchor. So if you're sitting in silence today, wondering if anyone notices, if anyone cares, let me tell you this: God does. He has been with you in every moment. Not a second of your pain has gone unnoticed. And right now, even now, He is wrapping His love around you like a blanket, soft, silent, steady. That is the peace that passes all understanding. Not flashy, not loud, but deep, steady, real. You don't have to fight to be seen. You don't have to perform to be heard. Just whisper. Just turn your heart toward Him. He's closer than you know. He is your peace. There comes a moment when the storms are raging, when fear is loud, when nothing around you looks stable, and your soul starts searching for something solid, searching for something safe. And in that moment, you begin to realize what David knew so deeply in Psalm 142, "You are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living." David didn't say, "You gave me a refuge," or "You provided a temporary escape." No, he said, "You are my refuge." There's a difference. He wasn't just looking for a solution. He was looking for a person, God Himself. Because when life caves in and everything you've leaned on starts to collapse, the only true safety, the only true peace is in knowing that God is not just with you, He is your shelter. Now think of that. A refuge isn't a place you visit when everything is perfect. A refuge is where you run when everything's falling apart. It's the place you go when the world becomes too much. And David knew what that felt like. He was surrounded by enemies, running for his life, completely misunderstood, cut off from comfort. But even in the midst of all that chaos, he declared, "You are my refuge." He didn't say it because his situation had changed. He said it because his heart had turned toward the only one who never changes. And then he says something even more powerful. "You are my portion in the land of the living." What does that mean? A portion is something personal. It's something assigned to you. It's yours. When the children of Israel entered the promised land, each tribe received a portion, land, inheritance, something to hold on to. But David was saying, "God, you are my inheritance. You are what I have. You are what I need." Some of us have been chasing things to be our portion: success, approval, relationships, even comfort or control. And when those things fail us, and they will, our peace crumbles. But when God becomes your portion, your peace doesn't depend on what's going right or wrong. Your peace becomes anchored in who He is. Sometimes we think peace will come when the problem is solved, when the pain is gone, when the door finally opens. But that's not lasting peace. That's circumstantial peace. God offers something deeper, something eternal. He offers Himself. And I want you to hear me. This isn't an abstract idea. This is real. God wants to be the place you run to, not just the God you sing about. He wants to be the voice that calms your storm, not just the idea that comforts your mind. He wants to be personal, not distant. And He is. You see, when David said those words, "You are my refuge," he was in a cave. He wasn't sitting on a throne, surrounded by comfort. No, he was in the darkest season of his life. And yet he discovered something that changes everything. Peace isn't about the cave. It's about the one who meets you there. The truth is, some of you are in a cave right now. A cave of confusion, a cave of disappointment, a cave of grief. And you've been trying to claw your way out, thinking that peace is waiting outside the cave. But I'm here to tell you, peace can find you in the cave, right where you are. Because God is your portion. He is your refuge. Not when everything gets better, but right now. There is a sweetness in His presence that cannot be explained, only experienced. And when you've truly tasted it, when you've allowed Him to be your refuge, you won't chase the counterfeit things anymore. You'll stop running to people who don't understand. You'll stop trying to escape through distractions, because you have found what your soul was always longing for. This kind of peace silences the voices that tell you you're not enough. It calms the fears that whisper you won't make it. It settles the anxiety that tells you you're alone. Because once you know who your refuge is, the storm loses its power. That's why, even if nothing around you changes, something inside you shifts. You begin to breathe again. You begin to rest, not because the battle is over, but because you've stopped fighting alone. You're hidden in Him, covered by His love, anchored by His word. And maybe today, all God is asking is for you to stop striving and start resting. Rest in the truth that He is enough, that He is your portion, that He is your place of peace. You don't have to wait until the storm passes. You can feel His peace right here, right now, because He is your refuge. When David cried out in Psalm 142, he wasn't just venting. He wasn't throwing his words into the dark hoping someone might catch them. No, he was crying out to a God he knew was listening. He said, "Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me." That is not the sound of despair. That is the sound of faith. You see, there is a kind of peace that comes, not when you see the answer, but when you believe the answer is coming. Not because of what you feel, but because of who you trust. David was in the middle of pressure, enemies surrounding him, his strength gone. But even then, he dared to believe that God would step in. He didn't pray like someone defeated. He prayed like someone expecting God to move. And I believe that's where peace begins to rise in our lives. When we don't just talk to God out of habit, but when we come to Him expecting that He hears, expecting that He cares, expecting that He will do what only He can do. That kind of expectation isn't arrogant, it's surrender. It's the posture of a heart that knows it doesn't have the strength, but it knows the one who does. David said, "Rescue me, for they are too strong for me." That's honesty and humility wrapped in faith. It takes courage to admit you can't do it on your own. It takes maturity to say, "This is too much for me," but there is power in those words when they're followed by trust in God. Because when you confess your weakness, you make space for His strength. And listen, God is not threatened by your desperation. In fact, it's often your desperation that draws you closest to Him. When all your other options fall apart, when your own plans fail, when people let you down, suddenly your heart turns toward the only one who never fails. And in that turning, something beautiful happens. Heaven leans in. God doesn't ignore a cry born of faith. He responds. That's what David believed. That's why he kept crying out, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he believed suffering was not the end of his story. He believed deliverance was on the way. And I wonder, how would your prayer life change if you really believed God was about to move on your behalf? How would your heart feel if you prayed? Not out of panic, but out of promise. Some of us have gotten used to praying just to survive. We whisper prayers like, "God, just get me through the day." But there's more. You were made for more than survival. You were made to walk in peace that flows from trust. And that trust doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It means you've placed your situation in the hands of the one who holds all things together. I want you to know today, God responds to faith. He responds to a heart that leans on Him. Even if your faith feels small, even if your voice trembles when you pray, even if all you can do is say His name, that's enough. Because peace isn't found in how strong your faith sounds. Peace is found in the one your faith is anchored to. And David didn't just believe God would deliver him, he expected it. And that expectation changed how he faced his trouble. He didn't wait until everything got better to believe. He believed in the middle of the darkness. He praised in the middle of the cave. And that's the invitation for you right now, not to wait until the answer arrives, but to let peace come as you pray with expectation. God's timing is not always our timing, but His heart is always faithful. And if you will dare to pray, expecting Him to move, you will begin to feel peace even before the rescue comes. Because peace isn't the absence of the problem. It's the presence of confidence that God is working, even when you can't see it yet. So maybe today is the day you shift your prayers. Not just, "God, help me," but, "God, I believe you're going to help me." Not just, "God, I'm scared," but, "God, I know you're stronger than what I'm facing." And as that expectation grows, so will your peace. You'll begin to rest not because the battle is over, but because you trust the one who fights for you. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to be strong enough. You just have to pray with expectation and believe deliverance is coming. There's a moment in Psalm 142 where something begins to shift. Not because the situation has changed, but because the heart has turned. David says, "Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name." Did you hear that? He's still in the cave. He's still surrounded. The enemies haven't vanished. But now his heart is reaching for more than relief. It's reaching for restoration. He's not just asking for freedom so he can escape. He's asking for freedom so he can worship. That's when you know the peace of God has started to take root in your soul. You're no longer begging for survival. You're longing to glorify Him. You want out, not just to breathe easier, but to praise louder. You see, real peace isn't passive. It moves you. It begins to transform what you ask for. Suddenly, your prayer becomes less about running from the pain and more about drawing closer to the one who's been with you in the middle of it. That's what happened in David's heart. That's what happens in yours when the presence of God begins to carry you from desperation to devotion. And when David prayed those words, "Set me free from my prison," he wasn't only talking about the physical place he was in. There was something deeper he was reaching for. The prison of fear, the prison of despair, the prison of shame, the prison of discouragement, those invisible walls that try to keep us small, silent, and afraid. But David didn't settle there. He believed that even from within those walls, God could reach in and lift him out. And that same God is reaching for you now. Maybe you're not in a cave, but you feel caged by something. Caged by worry, caged by regret, caged by a past that won't let go. But the Spirit of the Lord still sets captives free. He still breaks chains, and he still breathes peace into places you thought were permanently broken. There is no prison so dark that his light can't enter it. There's no weight so heavy that his presence can't lift it. But you have to ask. You have to believe, just like David did, that God doesn't just want to bring you out. He wants to bring you up. Not just free you from something, but lead you into something. Something fuller, something deeper, something holy. The proof of that freedom is not just when your circumstances shift. It's when your worship begins to rise. When your voice starts declaring God's goodness, even before the outcome arrives. When you say, "Set me free," not so I can hide, but so I can praise you. That kind of praise changes the atmosphere. It transforms your cave into a sanctuary. It turns your lowest place into a holy place. That's what David was doing. He was prophesying with his praise. He was saying, "God, I know where I am, but I also know what you can do. And when you set me free, I will not stay silent. I will worship. I will declare your name." That's powerful. That's what peace can do. It awakens a voice in you that trouble tried to silence. And then David says something beautiful. "Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me." In other words, he believed that the goodness of God wouldn't just bring him out, it would bring him into community again. Peace doesn't isolate you. It reconnects you. It reminds you that you're not alone, that there are others who will celebrate with you, that your story isn't over, that what God does in your life will draw others, not to you, but to his faithfulness. Some of you need to hold on to that today. Maybe you've been alone. Maybe you've been in a place where no one seemed to understand. But God is not only going to bring you peace, he's going to surround you with people who carry that same spirit of faith. You're not going to stay isolated. God is leading you into freedom and into fellowship. So lift your eyes, even from the middle of your cave. Let your heart begin to hope again. Let your mouth begin to whisper praise again. Because he's not just the God who finds you, he's the God who frees you. And that freedom is coming. Not just so you can say, "It's over," but so you can say, "God did it, and I will praise him." This peace, as David brings Psalm 142 to a close, he speaks a final truth that can only come from someone who's walked through the valley and found God there. He says, "Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me." After all the crying out, after the desperate plea for rescue, after the raw confession of weakness, there is hope. There is confidence. Not just that God will deliver him, but that others will see it. That God's goodness will be so evident, so undeniable, it will draw people in. That is the mark of real peace. Not that it hides your story, but that it becomes your testimony. The peace of God doesn't make your past disappear. It transforms it. It redeems it. It weaves the pain and the process into a beautiful narrative of God's mercy and power. When you walk in his peace, even the things that once broke you can begin to bless others. David believed this. He believed that God's goodness wasn't going to be quiet. He believed it would shine through his life. He didn't have the full picture. He didn't know when or how, but he had a quiet confidence. Because when you've truly encountered God in your darkest place, you come out different. You don't walk the same. You don't speak the same. You carry something, an authority, a stillness, a fire that can't be faked. That's what the peace of God does. It doesn't just calm the storm outside, it anchors you on the inside. And people will notice, not because you told them how strong you are, but because they see how faithful God has been. That's what David was saying. He knew that when God brought him out, others would see and gather, not around David's strength, but around God. You see, the goodness of God is not just something we experience for ourselves, it's something we carry for others. When peace becomes your portion, your very presence begins to release it. Your words carry healing. Your story becomes a signpost pointing to the one who makes all things new. You may not even realize it, but someone else's breakthrough is tied to your testimony. Someone's weary heart is going to find strength again because they saw what God did in you. And maybe that's why God allows us to walk through caves, not to crush us, but to reveal himself to us in a way we couldn't see before. Because when you've seen him as your refuge, when you've learned to lean on him as your portion, when you've cried out and felt his peace surround you in the night, you carry something sacred. You become a witness. And the world needs witnesses more than it needs explanations. Peace becomes contagious, not because you pretend everything is perfect, but because your heart is settled, it's steady. And that kind of peace, it's rare. It stands out, it speaks louder than your words. That's what draws people. Not your performance, not your platform, but the peace of God resting on your life. That quiet assurance that says, I've been through the fire, but he kept me. I've faced the storm, but I didn't drown. He was with me. He is with me still. This is where your faith becomes sight. When you start to see the evidence of his hand, not just in your deliverance, but in the people who are drawn to it, you start to realize that the story wasn't just about your pain. It was about his purpose. He was shaping something in you, something eternal, something others would need. And I want you to see this. David didn't wait until everything was fixed before he declared God's goodness. He spoke it in faith. He spoke it while still in the cave. That's what peace allows you to do. It gives you the confidence to say, God, you will be glorified in this. Others will know who you are through what you do in me. That is peace with a purpose. Not just to comfort you, but to carry his presence to a world that's desperate for it. To let God finish the work, let him bring you through. But even now, in this very moment, let his peace be your testimony. Let it speak when words fail. Let it shine when your strength runs out. Because the goodness of God will not remain hidden. It will surround you. It will fill your life. And yes, others will see it. The peace of God is not just for you, it's for the world. He's reaching through you.